What's up, fam? My name's Kiahonfire, and welcome back to Conan Exiles. Today, I kind of wanted to do a bit of a video that would spark off some discussion, and maybe we can do some comments together as well. But this is basically going to be a video about what I would like to see in Conan 2020. This includes, perhaps with the new map, what we may see in there. So, let's get discussing. With a new map coming this year, we have a lot on Conan Exiles plate, so we have a very interesting year coming up. However, with the usual style of Conan, they do like to release DLCs, and I've been thinking I would like to see something a little bit different this time, from our usual building pieces to weapons, etc. Personally, I'd like to see more things like the Debaucheries of Decado DLC with all those decoration pieces, some more of that kind of variety, and perhaps even some DLC pieces for different hairstyles, such as the one I'm wearing now from a brilliant mod I showcased not so long ago. It is a very pretty hair mod, so you can check that video out if you have some spare time. But things like that allow to increase in vanity are always greatly appreciated, so I would love to see some more things like that in the Conan Exiles universe. Different hairstyles, slightly different ways of doing DLC mods and etc. That's always nice to obtain and get. Next thing I'd actually like to really see is actually something really simple. Double doors. At the moment we only have single doors, which means only one person can enter at a time. So if you have a clan with a lot of people, sometimes it gets a little bit annoying just going through one door. Or if you want to bring fools and pets through the same door, then having a bigger door is always appreciated. So something like a double door or perhaps a wider frame, I would also like to see in Conan Exiles. So that would be really nice to have a feature like that. Another thing in Conan Exiles this year I'd like to see is actual more traps and things like that. There is multiple traps you could do that actually exist in kind of medieval times that you could trigger and do and have in Conan Exiles that would be relevant and actually interesting. So you could have things like bear traps, you could even have things like ballista turrets to expand upon the actual gameplay with bow and arrow or bow mechanics, things like that. Maybe perhaps we could even have a demon fire orb floor trap, so you stand on it and it sets fire to you or whatever. Like we have in the actual Warmaker dungeon, you have little traps that you walk on and poison comes up at you, or explosions or things like that. You could do that with smoke or fire poison, that kind of thing. I would like to see that. Or you could even have something like a battering ram for big gates that you could charge through. You could actually implement that quite well now that we have horses. You could attach it to it and work it out that way, that you would need a horse to power it. Or maybe even a rhino would make more sense for that actually, because it's got a much bulkier build. But more traps I think would be really cool, and it would expand upon maybe some of the PvP stuff we have currently. Because there isn't a whole load of traps, we only have things like the trebuchet, the bucket of oil that you pour on people's heads, etc. So we could expand upon that, that would be nice. And then speaking about more things like that, we could also have new weapon type, like a war scythe, like the kind of Grim Reaper style scythe that you could get, that you could slice enemies with, that would apply different buffs. You could do a cripple on that, maybe a bleed kind of weapon with that. That would be pretty cool. Or perhaps you could do something like a halberd. It's like a battle axe polearm. Those things are pretty cool as well. You could expand upon that and add a new weapon type to keep people interested. Perhaps you could even add it in the new paid map, something interesting like that, to keep us going, and something unique that we could have this year that might not be so hard to make. As of last year as well, we had the new addition of horses, so perhaps a little more loving on the animal types we have currently to be introduced in 2020. Perhaps like things like saddles for other animals that could make them more interesting, or things like that. So you could have saddlebags that you could attach to an elephant or a rhino, let's say. You don't have to ride it if that's too difficult to add in. You could just have it so they can hold extra space inside their inventories if they have this such saddle on them. And then you could also have different saddles. Perhaps you could even do a DLC that goes like, oh, you can have some of these normal saddles in game in vanilla, but if you get this DLC, you can have a really cool spiky looking rhino one that looks really awesome. So perhaps you could do another DLC that way, or you could just add it to the core game with having different saddles on different things. You could even have a scouting pack for a wolf, so when it's following you, little symbols will pop up on the screen or on your map that will indicate chests nearby or books and lore to read. Perhaps this will help new players actually find things without the use of guides and things like that, so they could actually use some in-game help that way by having something like a scouting pack for a dog of some kind. So little things and pieces like that. You don't have to make riding things to make them interesting, but I would like a little bit more interest added to creatures and etc. Because at the moment it just feels like you can get any creature you want, but perhaps they don't really have a purpose, whereas it would be really nice if they had an additional purpose to make them more useful or etc. Even if it's just carrying more of a certain type, or say the big cat can perhaps hold more hide and things and decreases the weight value on it to be able to travel along with it. Or you could have meat packs for things that would decrease the weight on meat, so when you went meat farming you could bring along your little compadre and it would hold that for you. So you kind of get the idea what I mean with that. Something to make the animals in Conan Exiles more interesting would be absolutely brilliant. And now I'm going to go on to my next thing of teleporting. I've seen on the forums that sometimes it's a big problem that people will actually camp obelisks and kill players on the other side. So this means if you teleport and perhaps you don't load in as fast as you would because somebody has a base nearby, that people can just slaughter you without you even seeing or having a chance to react to it. So I would think something like a little cooldown timer as you go through the other side would be quite nice, just to be able to save a few people from these kind of horrible camping raids, etc. So even if it's like a 10-second no damage delay kind of thing, you teleport, you got 10 seconds of immunity as soon as you poof through the other side, then I think that might make teleporting a little bit more fair. I don't know what you think about that one, but I've seen that people have been talking about it a lot, and I think it's kind of a little bit mean when you just camp people on obelisks and then they come through the other side without even a fighting chance because their screen is still black. You can only see the load screen, etc. Perhaps you could even make it so that when the person teleports through the other side, they become invisible, they cannot hurt anything, and nobody can hurt them. That way the person can't exploit this kind of cooldown timer that you get from the obelisks and hurt other people via that. So just something like that, little cooldown timer, I think would be nice for some people on official PvP. That would stop that kind of attitude going along, because I think it's just plain unfair really in a lot of cases. If you want to use the obelisk system, let's say if you wanted to go home quick or something like that, then that would pretty much destroy that. So something that really bothered me when the Thrall update came was the perks on Thralls. So I thought perhaps this year even something like a simple perk mind wipe potion for Thralls would be nice. Something that would reduce their level back about to the point where the last perk is. So if they're level 20, they would go back to level 15, and then you could farm it out for another chance of a roll on perks. That way you can still have the grind you want in there, but then you can also have another chance to re-roll the perk, because sometimes it takes quite a bit of time to level your Thrall back all the way to 20, and then on level 20 of you can get a disappointing perk like all survival or something like that. Kind of like how this guy has a +3 in survival then a -5. Those are kind of poor rolls right there. Apart from the drunk and the eagle eye is kind of nice, but if you didn't want those, then you could roll it back with a special potion to the previous level and then grind back up and try and get a different set of rolls. I think that would be really nice, and you could lock it behind a pretty good dungeon to be able to get it. So a difficult dungeon to be able to get an ingredient, say, that you need to be able to obtain to make these potions. So something that helps with perk rerolls on potions would be really nice for actual Thralls, I think. And I think that would be a pretty nice addition, so you don't have so many throwaway Thralls, etc, etc. Speaking about potions, I would really like a rework on some of the old potions in the game, such as Lotus potions. I actually was reviewing them the other day, and I found some of the information on them to be quite redundant. So if you to actually go and get the super fish from the sunken dungeon, you could get the same kind of buffs but without the loss on there. So you wouldn't get drunk or anything if you had the fish, but you'd get about the same buff on the fish as you would with the lotus potion. So what's the point in making the lotus potion if you get what I'm trying to say? So perhaps a little bit of love or a rework on the lotus potions could be done this year to make them actually worth grinding out for, because currently at the moment there are multiple other things that you could use to buff yourself that is a lot easier to obtain. So something reworking those would be nice, and I imagine that wouldn't be too difficult to remake a different effect on them. Perhaps you could make them better than the fish or something like that, because they are still pretty difficult to get. Even the ones where you go and get either the lava lotus flowers or the grey lotus flowers can be quite tricky to get still. So having an actual point to be able to actually farm these out and make the potions would be nice. Now my point on dungeons. We have a lot of really cool dungeons in the Conan Exiles world, but what strikes me the most is actually the majority of them require level 60 to be able to craft most of the stuff. So even with the Forgotten City, you need a really high level. For the Witch Queen Lemurian stuff to be able to craft it, you actually need to use the higher armor table. So I wouldn't really class it as a low level dungeon because of that fact that is actually in there. But it is easy like a low level dungeon, so I don't really get the point in that. But then you have all these other dungeons that have been implemented that are really great and really good fun, but I'm seeing a missing point here. You have Dregs, which is a low level dungeon there that you can do early on. But then where's the next one that you could advance onto? There is a big gap in between the levels where you could do a nice dungeon. So perhaps something like a mid-tier level dungeon this year would also be great, because we already have a lot of high-tier level dungeons. We just need something that would cater for the mid-tier as well, that could go in there quite nicely. And talking about things that are dark and dangerous, how about some development on corruption? You could tie it in with a sorcery that was promised, or an update like that. I don't know if it's still being worked on, but you could say you could make the corruption more useful. There are several items in the game that actually give you corruption when you put on the item or equip the item. So perhaps you could make these things more useful. Like perhaps you need to be corrupted to a certain stage to be able to make dark magic. So perhaps you need 50% corruption in both bars to be able to craft dark things, like a bottled sandstorm or a quicksand solution that makes players sluggish in the space affected. You could do something like that with it, or I'm sure there's plenty of people with really cool ideas to do with potions and sorcery out there. But that's just some of the examples I'm thinking of, so perhaps we could have some way to make the corruption a useful thing in the game, and not just something you want to wipe off yourself immediately with a dancer in Conan's Tavern. And speaking of things that don't do many things, how about an update on Purge Thralls? Purge Thralls currently pretty much craft all the same thing, and they do not craft legendary armor patch kits, but some blacksmiths can actually craft you legendary weapon patch kits. So how about we update some of those that they can actually craft the legendary patch kits, or maybe something else that is interesting, like an upgrade to Kari armor or stuff like that. So a little bit of love on the armorers of the Purge. Perhaps it might be more worth farming out Purge Thralls then that of the armorer class, or there are many other classes that you can get that don't do very much at the moment. So some love there would be really cool. And speaking of some love there, how about a UI update? Something that allows you to save your previous things on your hotbar when you die. Usually when you die in Conan Exiles, your whole hotbar will be blank, kind of like this. But it would be nice to have, you can see I have an exploding trap here that's not existent in my inventory, an explosive jar. I would like a little save on it, so when I die and I go and collect my stuff, I don't have to spend like 10 minutes sorting it all back out again. Instead it'll just go into the slots I was previously had them in, and you kind of get the idea. A lot of survival games do it, and I would really quite like Conan to do it as well, because it would save us a ton of time on resorting the inventory out. And then finally I want to talk about a new religion maybe. We haven't had a new religion in quite a while. The last one was actually the Decado religion, so perhaps we could have a nice update on that. Already in the game there has been a religion spoken of the Dagon one. The Witch Queen speaks about it, and we even have a whole dungeon dedicated to the actual god. Perhaps we could make the end of the dungeon useful this way by implementing the Dagon religion. You could even make it so that people have to learn this in the Sunken City dungeon, so you could go in there and learn it from a fish person, or perhaps you can have to complete the dungeon to be able to talk to the teacher itself. And then I had a little additional idea of an item that could be added if this ever gets implemented. Perhaps you could learn to make a fish helmet when you have learnt the religion on the basic tier. And if you make this fish helmet and equip it, then it makes the fish people in the Dagon dungeon passive towards you unless you hit them. I think that would be pretty cool. And then you could also do with that, you can only talk to a Dagon fish man with wearing this hat on, so he mistakes you of one of his kind. So you have this little hat that deceives people. That would be really cool. And if you have that fish hat on, you can talk to the Dagon priest that will trade you perhaps fishman eggs, so you could have your own fishman pet. And then you could even lead on from that and make it so to make the actual fishman stuff, to be able to tame it, the best way to get a greater fishman would be to feed it something from the improved fish traps, such as the moray eel or the anglerfish. Could improve the chances of getting a greater fishman. So something unique like that. It's just a suggestion, really. Most of these are a suggestion or something like a little tweak or fix in the game that I thought I would like to discuss with some of you, and then see what you guys would like in the future of Conan Exiles. Maybe not this year, maybe the next year, maybe not ever, but perhaps if you're listening, Fancom, these are some of my ideas that I would like to see in Conan Exiles in the future. And of course, I'm looking very forward to the new map coming also in the future of Conan Exiles, that I hope will have a lot to adventure on and things to do and all of that good business. So let me know suggestions you would like in Conan Exiles in the future, and that will be all from me today. Thank you for watching, I love you, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye!